school or the next worship service, feel free. I would like to introduce Dr. Nelson Rivera. He is a professor of theology and ethics at United Seminary in Philadelphia. And he is also a member of the 13th round of ecumenical discussion between the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church. I did not know before discussing this with him that there were official rounds of talks. So it's very interesting and a perfect discussion for Reformation Sunday, I think. And looking forward to hearing about the current state of the Lutheran-Catholic dialogue. So please welcome to Dr. Rivera. I am recording this so we can look back on it afterwards and provide it to people that aren't coming. But thank you for being here. There is a sign-in sheet going around at some point. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, so let me ask a question. Are you aware of the kind of ecumenical dialogues and full communion agreements that the ELCA has? For example.
Yeah.
See, I was afraid of it. Yeah. The ELCA is an ecumenical church in many ways. As of today, we have full communion agreements, and those are defined as exchange of pulpit and table, meaning that we are invited to commune, it's a two-way street with the other Christian group or denomination, but also that our pastors can serve that other denomination and their pastors can serve our congregations through agreements. So, quickly, do you know or have you heard that we have full communion agreements with which churches right now?
Episcopals. Yeah.
Episcopal Church, very good.
Catholic?
Not yet, but is the longest ongoing dialogue. Ecumenical dialogue is with the Roman Catholic Church. Now, this year is 60 years in dialogue. I mean, if it looks like a long time, hey, the Reformation was 500 years. So we have also communion agreements with 3 Reformed churches together. So one agreement, 3 Reformed churches. Presbyterian Church in the USA, Reformed Church in America, and United Church of Christ. So that's one agreement with 3 of them. And you said Episcopal Church.
Could you define what a communal agreement even is?
Yeah, full communion agreement. That means that we are invited, each church invite all their members to come and commune. No quiz given, so to say. And today for us, since so many churches practice, especially the LCA but others, an open table, it may not look like much, but it really matters. The other aspect of full communion is that I, as a Lutheran pastor, can be called to serve a Episcopal congregation or a Presbyterian congregation. The other, or vice versa. See, again, we can have a pastor who is a United Church of Christ working for us. But it depends on the full communion agreement. We have full communion agreement also with the Moravian Church in America, which is the one that everybody forgets about. I know about it because I worked for the Moravian University and Theological Seminary for 6.5 years, and I learned a lot about them and our full communion agreement. And we have full communion agreement with United Methodist Church. So we have 4 communion agreements with 6 churches. Because again, Reform is 3 churches together. Now we have ongoing dialogues with the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ. We have ongoing dialogue with the Mennonite Church. We have ongoing dialogue with the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Now, we also have good relationship with others, of course, with several Baptist denominations, Pentecostals, and so on. But again, 4 communion agreements. Now, the longest lasting dialogue, as I just said, is with the Catholics, because it has a complexity, to put it that way. Okay, now, since in the introduction, and correctly, have been said that I'm a member of the 13th round of conversations with the Roman Catholic Church, I just want you to know that this is the result of the first 12 rounds of conversation. Now, we began in 1965, right at the end of the Second Vatican Council of the Roman Catholic Church that went on from 1962 through 1965. Immediately, conversations began, not just with Lutheran Catholics have conversations. Right now, they have ecumenical dialogue with 23 groups, just the Catholics, because that includes also other religions, Muslims, Jews, etc. So here at least you get an idea of the reports. These are reports. All of these are publications. You can find them in the seminary library, for example. And some of them, at least the last 3, they're available through Fortress Press. That's free announcement. Anyway, so the Nicene Creed. Oh, that to this year, 2025, you may have heard these. We are celebrating church-wide the 1700th anniversary of the original Nicene Creed. That was 325. So anyway, so immediately the first report, dialogue was about that. One on baptism, the Eucharist and ministry, and there you go. Now, the 13th round that began in 2022 follows immediately after the 12 on the teaching ministry of the churches. You know, by what authority? Who is called to teach in our churches, right? Now, in the Catholic Church, it's kind of easy. You know, bishops hold the magisterium of the church, you know, the teaching ministry of the church. But among Lutherans, who's called to teach or say what? You may think, oh, seminary professors. Actually, we're more like consultants, not the actual teachers of the church, except for people like you who dare to listen to me. Okay. So here we are. Now, what is the current conversation about the 13th dialogue? In case you wonder, the 13th dialogue has, the members are 6 theologians from the Roman Catholic Church. Now, let me clarify. The Roman Catholic Church in the USA, meaning the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. Because there is an international dialogue also going on for decades between the churches that are represented through the Lutheran World Federation and then the Vatican Office for Christian Unity, or they call it the Secretariat for Christian Unity. So that dialogue is international. The one I represent is national.
Did you see that the Pope and the King of England had service together?
Service in the sense that joining
They were on
a worship, you mean?
Worship, yes.
Yeah, there have been,
There have been 500 years.
yeah, there have been several instances where the Pope have joined leaders of some of the denomination with whom they have dialogues or some kind of agreements, including the Anglican Church, of course. Yeah. So the 13th dialogue focuses on the nature of the ministry. Remember, the 12 was the teaching ministry. Who holds the teaching ministry in the church? But then they realized that, oh, but we didn't really define what is the ministry, especially what is the ministry of bishops. Now, Catholic have documentation, centuries-old documentation, defining the role of their bishops, what are they in charge of. Lutherans, we don't have that much of documentation, how we think about our bishop. In the Lutheran writings, especially the Lutheran confessional writings, there is one treatise that speaks about the Pope and the Bishop by Philip Melanchthon. And then, of course, in other writings, in the Book of Concord, there are references like Article 28 of the Augsburg Confession speak about bishop. So here and there, we say some things about what is a bishop, what are they supposed to be doing. But for the most part, tradition, for Lutherans, bishops are no different than any other ordained pastor, except in the office that they occupy and some responsibilities for oversight of congregations. Everything else is basically the same definition, the same duties. And we have bishops and pastors, we have among Lutherans, the same ordination. It's one ordination to word and sacraments, not two. So, but in the Catholic Church, bishops are ordained as bishops. So that's a major difference. So anyway, we are challenged to explain to Roman Catholics and show the documentation who are bishops, what are they supposed to be doing, how do we elect the bishops, etc. Because as you know, in the Roman Church, bishops are selected by Rome. In the Lutheran Church, bishops are elected through synod assemblies, which has to have a percentage of lay people and clergy, as you know. So it's a different process. So anyway, we want to explore with the office of the bishops, and the word that is thrown around often is episcope, which is the Greek for supervision, oversight, visitation, which already tells you how the New Testament writings see the bishop when it speaks about oversight, supervision, and visitation. So the meaning of apostolicity, which we say that the church is apostolic because it's founded on the message of Jesus as apostle. But can we define apostolicity? And if we can define it, say, can Roman Catholics see our church as being truly, not just in name, apostolic? So, and I have learned that even among Roman Catholics, there are two notions of apostolicity. One that has to do with the practices of the church, and one that has to do with doctrinal statements of the church. So it's good to have these because it opens the door for Catholics to say, if Lutherans do not have a lot of writing about the definition of apostolicity, at least in their life, in their mission, in the way they preach, in the way Lutherans provide pastoral care, they look very apostolic to us. So those distinctions matters so that the dialogue doesn't stop cold, but it can move on. So they can recognize at least one of the definitions of being apostolic among Lutherans. If you have any question, please, because unfortunately, unfortunately, we always have to use some technical terms. Well, they call it also Sunday language, and it's Sunday anyway. We're fine. So, also,
Just a clarifying question, kind of going back to the beginning. So this is what the conversation is about.
right now, yeah.
But before even that, at a higher level, the objective of the conversation is educational, to make it more ecumenical in worship, to make it more that different members could go across different services, that pastors and priests could speak for each other. I'm just trying to understand the
Yes.
overall objective.
I would
At
say,
a higher level.
I would say all of the above, but
Okay.
the main goal of any ecumenical dialogue towards a full communion agreement, is that we can commune in each other's churches. Now, we Lutherans, LCA, because we practice what is called an open table. If a Catholic, observant Catholic, faithful Catholic, comes to the Lutheran Church, we're open. The table is open. We leave it to that person. If that person feels comfortable, because I know Catholics do not feel comfortable coming to the Lutheran communion. And there are others that feel comfortable. So we do not reject them. So the major obstacle is on the other side, whether a faithful Lutheran, communing Lutheran, can just go and commune in a Catholic church. And they would say, we do not have a full communion agreement, so you should. That said, the Catholic Church is very big. And it has all kinds of people with different ideas about how to proceed. And so there are Catholics, priests, religious orders, that they don't want to wait. They don't want to wait another 60 or 100 years to see this happening, that we have Catholics and Lutheran have a full communion agreement. So I visited a Benedictine monastery in central Minnesota. One of the dialogue was there with the Catholics. And the Benedictines told us, if you want to come to communion, to our group, the Lutheran group, we're open. We decided not to do it. Why? Because we are part of the dialogue that has as its goal, one day, a full communion between Catholics and Lutherans. So we didn't feel that we had to take a shortcut, right? So, but we came forward, you come with your arms crossed and you get a blessing. And that was quite an experience, but to know that Benedictines, at least in Minnesota, they're so open. Well, they're in Minnesota, they know many Lutherans. After all, it's like, hey, come if you wish, And I know of friends of mine who have been in Catholic churches, and they came, they went because of their families. Their families are Catholics, like mine, by far, especially my wife's family, they're all Catholics. So for example, if I go and they are like, oh, could my cousin or brother or whoever, or friend, they go to the priest commune? I know of cases where the priest have said, no. And there are cases where the priest have said, let me talk to him or her. Are you faithful? Are you commune every Sunday? Yes. Okay, but don't tell anybody to come. So, but officially speaking, we're in the process. So, to get to full communion, no question asked, is the main goal. Now, of course, everything you mentioned is also goals of these conversations. But one of the main ones really is, can we really understand each other? Meaning, for too long we have been misrepresenting what the other said. Can we really understand what is the Lutheran position on the Lord's table or the Catholic? Because there is a lot of myth. And for example, so there was the dialogue. There was a dialogue on the Eucharist. And a lot came out of the dialogue that when Catholics speak about transubstantiation of the elements at the table, and the Lutherans speak about the real presence of Christ given in the elements, we are pointing in the same direction with different language, meaning that both churches strongly believe that Christ is truly present at the table and truly given to those communing. See, but we go like through different paths, but actually with the same purpose and goal in mind, to assert the validity of the sacrament of the table, but different languages, right? Does that help?
Yes.
So these are part of the conversation. So what is the relation of the ordained ministry, priests, pastors, bishops, to the priesthood of all the baptized that Lutheran have been speaking about for 500 years, right? So for Catholics love this idea, believe it or not, yes. It's just that they have to better define it. And one of the goals of the synodality, you have heard, it has been in the news since 2022 through 2025, early this year, when they completed the process. This was Pope Francis' idea. Let's talk about synodality across the Roman Catholic Church. I was invited as an ecumenical partner to one of the dialogues. Like, there were more like 100 people from different churches. They wanted to hear from us. What do you think about this idea? Now, synodality is exploring in the Catholic Church, exploring the role of the laity in decision making, in embracing the ministry of the whole people of God, the ministry of the whole church. It was Pope Francis' idea and intention to open as much as possible the door for the laity, men and women, to participate in a deeper way, in a deeper sense, more invested into the whole ministry of the church. And also there was a lot of listening sessions among Catholics themselves, globally speaking, about what would you like to see your church changing. And I read reports, and it was amazing, because from different parts of the world, from Latin America to Europe to United States, people were saying, we would like to see women ordained. That was just one among other things that the Catholic lady are asking. So they owe it to Pope Francis, the late Francis, to have opened. Why? That process of dialogue. The door is not yet that wide open, but the dialogue. And Pope Francis was hoping that this will continue with the new Pope. The other topic is the sacramentality of ordination, because Catholics have a specific way to understand ordination, and we're not exactly there. As I said, we hold to the one ordination of word and sacrament, and they have ordinations to deacons, presbyters, and bishops. Now, the ELCA just like 2-3 years ago only pulled together a lot of what they call roster leader positions, like associates in ministry, diaconal ministers, deaconesses, parish administrators, director of Christian education, directors of music. So they brought all of this together and now offers ordination to word and service. Now, if you know a director of music or parish administrator that is not ordained, it's because the person have to ask and get into the process with the support of the pastor and the bishop. And then the person is going to candidacy for word and service, and once the person completes the process to word and service, say they are ordained. We're using the language of ordination for the first time for word and service, and it's recent. So, but that doesn't take away the fact that when it comes to pastors and bishops, is but one understanding of ordination to word and sacraments. Does that make sense? Just because I know that by adopting the language of ordination for deacons, people to word and service, it can create a bit of confusion. But that's the language that DOC adopted fairly recently. So, still, Romans want to know, is ordination forever? Is ordination for a period of time? Things like that. How do we explain it? How do we define ordination? Do we speak about the sacramentality of ordination? We don't. But we're listening. What do you mean by that? Maybe we're there and we haven't realized that. So, distinction between bishops and priests, including diaconia. So, the thing about bishops is that they have been always seen as having a prophetic ministry, a priestly ministry, and a shepherding. So, meaning the bishops in the Catholic Church have, listen to this, the fullness of the ordination. Not the priest, the bishop. That doesn't mean that the ordination to the priest is not completed or fully valid. It means that how they define holy orders, the bishop covers all the areas of holy orders. Again, on the prophetic ministry, priestly ministry, and the shepherding. Meaning, the bishop is the main pastor of the diocese. Meaning, and if the bishop is the pastor of the diocese, then the bishop is the pastor of every Roman Catholic congregation. The priest is there as a vicar of the bishop to be the pastor, to offer pastoral ministry and teach and preach, etc. As you know. Let me ask a question. Do you know what is the difference in the understanding of church between Lutherans and Catholics? If we ask, what is the basic unit of the Church of Christ? Where is the Church of Christ fully represented? What do Lutherans say?
Two or more.
Two or more. The assembly, the congregation. Each congregation, in a sense, can claim the fullness of the church. In a sense, I mean. Catholics, the diocese claims the fullness of the church. Therefore, no congregation, Catholic congregation, can separate or can dismiss or not listen to the pastor, meaning the bishop. That's a unity. Now, I think we can learn a few things from Catholics on that regard. And now that's me, I admit it, but I'm not alone. That Lutherans are not supposed, in principle, to be congregationalist. Meaning that we do have synods, that we're supposed to be together, congregations in a region, working together, gathering together with me, going to the assemblies, decision making. But as you know, not all pastors go to synod assembly, not all congregations send people to synod assemblies. So there is a lot that we can still learn from Catholics about what does it mean to belong to, in this case, a synod, for them to a diocese. What does it mean, really? So that's part of the conversation. Now, in 2015, we were celebrating 50 years See, 2015, now it's 60. But in 2015, they decided, Catholics and Lutherans, to look back. 50 years, what have we learned? So they decided to come together and write a report. So you saw the 12, right? Now the 12 wasn't there. There were 11 at the time reports. So they took the 11 reports and they decided to concentrate on teachings about church, ministry, and the Eucharist. They chose only 3 areas. So they wrote down the agreement, 32 agreements about those 3. And then they wrote down, they didn't call it disagreements, they call it growth areas. Need for more dialogue. So the publication of 2015 is called Declaration on the Way. Now, the Romans, they have to give it a Latin title to everything. It's called In Via, on the way. Anyway, so there you go. And you can get a copy you can download it from either the LCA webpage or the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops webpage. You look for Declaration of the Way and you can download it. It's fascinating. So anyway, it also took into account not just the 11 rounds in the U.S., but also what international dialogues have said, between Catholics and Lutherans. So basically, they summarize the agreements and the need for further conversation. Now, besides the, by now, 12 reports, besides the Declaration of the Way, at the international level, Lutheran World Federation, the Vatican Office for Ecumenical Affairs, they came together and they agreed on something called the Joint Declaration on the Doctrine of Justification, and they signed it. The officials of the Lutheran World Federation, representing many, 142 Lutheran churches globally, including the LCA, and the Vatican, the person in charge of ecumenical relations, they signed it in '99. So we do have an agreement, and very few people know, after almost 500 years, on what do we mean by justification by faith, and that we point, again, like happened with the Eucharist, we go in the same direction, that we want to affirm both churches that salvation is by grace and through faith for the sake of Christ, because of what Christ already did and still communicate to us. That was '99. 10 years later, United Methodist Church, meaning 2009, signed the agreement as well on justification. Now we're waiting to see if others will consider that. So, also in 2016, in view of 2017, remember 2017, the 500 years of the 95 Theses, October 31st, that we celebrate today, right? They put together a joint Catholic-Lutheran commemoration, a statement on the commemoration of the Reformation that was to happen a year later, signed by both Pope Francis and Lutheran World Federation representatives. And look what it says, among other things. Many members of our communities, so Lutheran Catholic, yearn to receive the Eucharist at one table as the concrete expression of full unity. Your question, right? We experience the pain of those who share their whole life but cannot share God's redeeming presence at the Eucharistic table. Meaning, for Lutheran Catholics, our relatives, our friends, our neighbors, co-workers. We acknowledge our joint pastoral responsibility to respond to the spiritual thirst and hunger of our people to be one in Christ. We long for this wound in the body of Christ to be healed This is the goal of our ecumenical endeavors, which we wish to advance also by renewing our commitment to theological dialogue. So, of course, the dialogue internationally and nationally have continued. Just a picture of when they signed the statement a year before, 2017, and you see Pope Francis, at the time the ELW president, Bishop Yunnan from Palestine, and the Church of Sweden, and other people there. It's a picture there. The service was, I believe, in London, I mean in Sweden. Anyway, what does the declaration say? Declaration of the Way, 2015. The heart of the declaration is the statement of agreements on church ministry and Eucharist, as I said before. I'm just looking at the time to see if we're good. We're still good.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So, as I said before, declaration draws together 32 consensus statements where Catholics and Lutherans already have said there are not church dividing differences between them. This is another distinction. They distinguish, or we distinguish between those doctrinal positions and practices that can be, in principle, be church dividing. So we really have to deal with those. But there are differences that will remain that do not have to be church dividing, right? Like, you can do this and we can do that, and there's no problem there, because we still agree on the heart of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So now, of course, easier said than done. You have to list which one might be or are church dividing and which one are not. Many things that are not church dividing has to do with piety. There's such a thing as religious pieties. You know, that Romans, Catholics do some things in a certain way, and Lutherans do their worship and things in a certain way. So when it comes to questions of religious pieties, how we practice our faith, normally they are not church dividing. And actually we can learn from one another about ways to pray. Like, for example, Catholics still pray the Rosary. Oh, well, there's a beauty to that. I want to know more about how they do that. Maybe I will adopt the practice. That's not church dividing. You could be a Lutheran and pray the Rosary because you use it for meditation, reflection, or because you find what is said. Actually, there's a beauty to that. Again, that's not church dividing. Of course, I know Catholics that don't use the Rosary anyway. So again, they don't have to be church dividing. But now, what could be church dividing? Well, can they accept the fullness of our own ordinations as Lutherans? What do they say about that? See, that can be church dividing. If they say that we reach a full communal agreement, they might say, but your pastor will have to be preordained. See? Actually, that was a question with the Episcopal Church. Wait, full communal agreement. So that means that a Lutheran pastor can go to the Episcopal Church, even be higher, will have to preside at the table. Do our Lutheran pastors need to be reordained? Why? Because Anglican pastors, Episcopal priests, they call them priests, remember? Episcopal priests are ordained by bishops who are said to be in historic succession, in historic apostolic succession through time. And we, our Lutheran bishops, do not claim that. But part of the agreement was, no, we accept, Episcopals, the validity of your ordinations as is. You don't need to be ordained. Otherwise, we probably would have signed the agreement, but it was. Now, what about the Catholic Church? That is still the question. And they have ways, they are exploring ways, the Catholics in the dialogue, they're exploring ways to go around that. What can we say in a way that we can actually accept Lutheran ordinations in a language? For Catholics, everything, you have to find the right language, the right term. And also, it needs to be translated into Latin to become official as well. So, what are the remaining differences? What needs to be worked on? So, both churches affirmed the declaration on the way in 2016 and in 2015. Okay. Remaining differences, and unfortunately, they will have to be brief, but at least I want to mention. And those that needs more nuance, let me see if I can say a bit more. I said that there are three main areas. Understanding of church, and I said something already about it, like, what is the basic unity of the church? Who has the fullness, when we talk to ministry, the fullness of ordination. So, Lutherans emphasis on the church and the congregation of the faithful, a local assembly. So what's that? Two or more gathered by the Word. Jesus is the Word, remember the incarnate Word. A creature itself of the Word. We said the church is a daughter of the Word of God. A creature created by the Word and the Spirit working together. Catholics agree on that. So we're good. Catholic emphasis on the church as a sacrament of salvation. They mean something specific about that. Remember, they use sacramental and sacrament for things that we don't call sacraments, at least not official. But they are a communion of believers. Good, check. Assigned to all people of God's salvific action in Jesus Christ. Meaning that the church itself, Catholics are saying, is sacramental. Why? It's called to practice all the sacraments. The sacraments have their origin and practice in the life of the church itself. So the church is a sacrament of Christ in the world. Can we say that as Lutherans? Actually, there are ways in which we find the language of the church as the basic sacrament sound. In the sense, again, what does sacrament mean? We go to the etymology. Sacramentum. Holy promise, basically. So is the church itself God's promise to the world? Yes, why not? Yeah, it's instituted by Christ. It's keep going with my ministry. Oh, so sacrament also is a kind of incarnational, strong representation. Can we say that about the church? Yeah, we can. Yes, of course. We like that. Now, sacramental is also because the church practices a number of sacraments, and you know the Catholic Church has 7 sacraments. But something little known by people is the Catholic Church wasn't always there. The definition of 7 sacraments, as we know it today, comes from the 13th century. Now, it's been a few centuries already, but it took 13 centuries to define the 7. Saint Augustine, in the beginning of the 5th century, thought there were 24 sacraments. Because any action that conveys a divine promise, for Augustine, that's a sacrament. Now, of course, there's a long discussion through the centuries, like other criteria to define the sacrament. As you know, the Lutherans, for the most part, have said, no, there are basically 2 sacraments. Why? Because these are the ones that Jesus himself participated of. He was baptized, he established the sacramental meal the last night. There is a mandate he participated of. Oh, immediately there's a problem. Jesus forgave sins. He was accused of blasphemy for that. He kept practicing forgiving sins that only belong to God, right? And also, he mandated the disciples to forgive sins. If you forgive the sins of anyone, they will be forgiven. If you retain them, they will be retained. I give you this authority. So, what the tradition calls absolution, confession and absolution, but the emphasis in the absolution. Can we call it a sacrament, as Catholics call it? For Catholic absolution is a sacrament. Can we call it? Well, later known by Lutherans is that in the Formula of Concord, that is in the Confessional Writings, the last of the Confessional Writings in the Book of Concord, the confessors left the door open for Lutherans to call absolution a sacrament. They didn't want to impose it, but they said, if there are Lutherans, pastors and congregations that want to speak of absolution as a sacrament, it's fine with us. By far, because apparently many Lutherans haven't read that, we keep speaking about the two sacraments, not the three sacraments. But again, even if we don't call absolution, when the pastor says your sins are forgiven, even if we don't call absolution a sacrament, it has sacramental character. Why? Because Jesus did it and then asked us to do it as well. And if those are criteria for defining sacrament, well, we are there, even if we don't think about it often. So we talk about the basic ecclesial unity. Ultimately, together we believe that we cannot be church alone. Let me check the time. Ministry. I mentioned this before because it happens with the dialogue with Episcopalians. Our bishops do not claim to be in apostolic succession or historic succession, or historic episcopacy is called differently sometimes. But even Catholics or Anglicans before them acknowledge that we have an apostolic message and apostolic practices as we preach, teach, preside at the table, baptize people, and offer pastoral care in different situations in life, as the apostles taught us. And also, of course, we declare the faith of the whole church through the Nicene Creed, and the Apostles' Creed, and the Athanasian Creed, because we have that one as well. And this is where the real issue comes, together with the authority of the bishops, also the question of ordination. Our bishops are ordained, not ordained as pastors. They don't have another ordination, remember. So, are our ordinations valid? So, what the Catholics in the dialogue are saying is that the question of the validity shouldn't be the question. We are not in a position, Catholics say, to say, oh, your ordination is valid or not. You have been doing the ministry for centuries, effectively. So, then, your ministries are effective. So, your ordained ministers do the job. So, how could we say they are not valid as the members, if they're valid or not? Of course they are. So, then what is the problem? They say, well, the problem is because we were not ordained by bishops in apostolic succession or historic succession, or bishops who are ordained as bishops themselves. The question is whether they say, the fullness of the ordination, like whether it is complete. So whether there is, as they say, and this is the discussion, whether there's something still lacking. Now, and it gets complicated because for Roman Catholics, when they ordain someone, they teach that that person received something that cannot be taken away unless there's a long process to take it away. But ordinarily, it's given to you. There's something, a gift, a charisma, something that now gets attached to you, to the ordained one. A special kind of gift, something unique that no other person has, only the ordained one. And we don't talk that way now, because for Lutherans, we are ordained by the church so that we can occupy the office of the ministry. That's why for Lutherans, before you get ordained, you have to have a call. If you don't have a call, you're not ordained. You're waiting. Once you have a call, meaning that you're called to occupy the office, the position. See, the office belongs to the church. The office of the ministry that the Osborne Confession calls the office of preaching, or the office of the gospel, belongs to the church, to the Lutheran Church. So the office, every congregation have the office. But then they call someone to occupy the office. Sometimes it's called the position. I like office because the language of the Osborne Confession, which is our main confessional document. So, for us, you're ordained to officially occupy the office. You're authorized by the whole church to do that. Now you can be regularly called. See? Now, we have a process through which say you don't have a call. You are without a call. 3 years later, the LCA knocks at the door and said, are you going to pursue a call? Yes, and you'll give me 1 more year. Request that. Okay, we don't have it. Now it's the 4th year. 4th year, we don't hear from you. So, after 6 years, we don't consider you ordained any longer. You're out of the roster. That doesn't happen in the Catholic Church because what is attached to you as something. It's yours. Unless you really, you have to do really badly. And then through a whole process through the Vatican, tribunals, and blah, 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 that you could be, as they say, defrocked, like we can expel you. So if the church gave it to you, the church can take it back. But the church doesn't take that lightly. We don't have that understanding. So, what is that something that for Romans we don't have? It has to do with that. But for us, it's like, I'll do my job anyway, I'll preach the gospel. So, again, one priesthood or two, what about the priesthood of all the baptized? Are we ordained once and for all? But in the Lutheran circles, if you're drawn from the roster, and then you come back 10 years later, do you have to be reordained, or is there another process that we can reinstall you? Again, these are questions Catholics ask of us. What do you do in those cases? How do you come? Right? Otherwise, it creates confusion. Ordination of women, of course. Catholics do not ordain women, and we don't know that they are any there will be full communion and recognition of mutual ordained ministries, the ordination of women, even if they don't do it, that's a separate question. But the ordination of our Lutheran women have to be acknowledged. Again, we put that on the table and it stays on the table. And finally, the ordination of bishops, as I was saying before, as the fullness of the sacrament of ordination. So, what are we going to do with our bishops? Are we do a separate ordination? We are in the process, not so much of thinking to reordain bishops or giving a new ordination, but we're in the process of redefining or adding or fine-tuning better the role of bishops. For example, Catholics have a conference of bishops in the US, and every country has a conference of Catholic bishops. They make real decisions, not just on policy or polity, but on practices and teaching. We have a conference of bishops in the LCA, but they are a consulting body. The executive of the LCA actually make more decisions than the conference of bishops can make. Again, they're mostly a consulting body, but little by little they have been growing in their teaching cultures, speaking out about different issues. And I'm mindful of the time. The time is off, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. So, but I think we covered all that matter, and then we could keep going for weeks.
Yeah.
There's much more to the dialogue, but thank you for your
Thank you.